All right, for the first 100 years of the United States Army, the basic infantry weapon was the single-shot muzzle loader and the bayonet. And the triangular bayonet was the bayonet. At the end of the Civil War, we had a super stock of these things sitting around at Springfield Armory. And when they developed the trapdoor, they decided to save money, take existing bayonets, reheat treat the socket, shrink it down, let it fit to 45-70, glue it, and save a lot of money. Well, as the years went by, they realized they were running out of bayonets. And the question was, well, what do you do next? At that time, there was a Colonel Buffington, famous for the Buffington sight on the 45-70. And Colonel Buffington, he thought he had the greatest thing since sliced bread. And that was with the Ramrod Bayonet. He thought this was a great idea. He really loved it. And he was able to convince Springfield Armory to go with this device, okay? Which could double as a cleaning rod, skewer things, cook over an open fire or whatever. And it was really a stopgap measure on the trapdoor rifle because they were running out of the triangular bayonets. And he kept pushing for it. He thought it was great. He really wanted the government to continue the concept. When the United States decided to go to a small bore, repeating smokeless rifle, the Krag. And he wanted the cleaning rod bayonet for this. Now the early Krags had a cleaning rod, okay? They're very hard to find. We used to have one here in the club and went to Maine. But there was a cleaning rod. And this one here, I don't know the one, the converted ones. But this is the 1896. Now, Buffington kept pushing for the Ramrod Bayonet. He was outvoted, and we adopted a bayonet based on the Swiss pattern. And it's a very nice bayonet. And if things had been done smarter in hindsight, this would have been the bayonet for the next 50 years. Now, for those of you who are interested in the Krag, the book, the ultimate book, is the Krag Bayonet History, Variations, Modifications by Donna Hartman, who was a member of this club. And the book originally retailed for, I think, $110. If you contact him at dh3451@comcast.net and mention that either you belong to NJACC or saw this presentation, I think he's selling them for under 100. And the first edition is still there. He is not going to come out with a second edition because there's no need for one. This is the ultimate guide to the Krag bayonet. Now, the Krag bayonet was a good knife bayonet, perfectly functional, and as a matter of fact, at West Point, these were used as late as 1956. They had chrome-plated ones. Now, we're going to adopt a new rifle. After the fiasco of the Spanish-American War, people realized that the Krag was very good against Philippine insurrectos and Chinese boxers. But against the regular troops of the Spanish Army, no. So we had to upgrade. And the next upgrade was to go to what we famously called the 03 Springfield. Now this particular one that I have here is in the first year of production. And when it was made, it had a Ramrod bayonet. Why? Because Buffington had the good fortune of one day walking into his superior's office and finding him dead behind the desk. Okay? The #1 man had a heart attack and died. Buffington became the #1 man at Springfield Armory and Research and Development. Everybody else thought the Ramrod bayonet was garbage, but he's the boss. So the Springfield comes with a Ramrod bayonet. This particular gun was originally a Ramrod Bayonet 03 Springfield. It does not have a groove in the handguard. The barrel is 05, and if you take these parts off and look, you can see where the Ramrod used to be. Now, how do we get rid of the Ramrod? Theodore Roosevelt was President of the United States. And one day at the White House, he was entertaining the British military attaché, and he invited one of the guards to come in who was equipped with an '03 Springfield with the Ramrod Bayonet. And the guy, had the guy extend the bayonet. Roosevelt takes a Krag, puts the blade bayonet on it, starts sparring with the guy, and snaps the Ramrod bayonet off. And he goes, no good, okay? So what happens? The word gets to Springfield Armory. The president does not want the Ramrod bayonet. I mean, can you imagine Barack Obama going, I think the M4 needs an EO check. Okay. Now, anyway, Ramrod bayonet. Now, who's in charge of the armory? Crozier. Buffington has retired. He is now living in Morris County, New Jersey. And for those of you who are interested, at Picatinny Arsenal is a street named after him. Okay? So the president has put out the word, no more ramrod. I want some kind of a blade. Okay? So they start researching and they go, well, what's some of the problems with the old Krag? They said the scabbard. It rusts, it gets dented. Another problem, they said, was the bayonet often falls out. So we got to solve two problems. One, no metal scabbard. Two, some way to retain it in the scabbard. So we get the 1905 bayonet, Springfield Bayonet, bright blade. Originally they were bright, okay? And it has this little complicated catch right here, so it doesn't fall out of the scabbard. That was considered critical, all right? We're going to find out later on that's going to be problematic. But in the beginning, that solves a problem. The scabbard, leather. No rust to worry about, okay? And it had the catch to put it on the belt the same as the Krag, all right? After a few years, 1910 to be exact. Well, first of all, the length of this. Let me show you what happened. I'm going to put my Krag bayonet on my Krag rifle. And the idea behind the Springfield was there'd be no more carbines. Whether you were an infantryman or a cavalryman, you had the same rifle. The problem was, or they felt there was a problem, was now you had a shorter rifle and it wouldn't have the reach. Right. Problem solved. We shortened the rifle, we lengthened the bayonet. Okay? We lengthened the bayonet. Same reach, no problem. Well, after a while, you got to remember that the Krag was a shorter bayonet. It swung on your belt. Now you've got this extra long bayonet, and it tends to get caught and get leveraged. And when it's leveraged, the hook snaps off. So they decided to do some modifications. The first one was to replace the metal with leather and put what are called the 1910 hooks, which are common in World War I, World War II, Korea. So they modified the existing scabbards, put a leather collar on it, and did some sewing and put the 1910 hooks on it. So that was the first change. That didn't work too well. If you look at it here closely, there's not much leather there. I'm sure the leather gave out. So they then went and improved it, but a lot more leather, rivets, everything else, and created a very strong scabbard. Then they decided, this thing is a real pain, the maintenance, it's dirty. So they developed what is now called the 1910 scabbard. And the idea was you could take this khaki cover right off, wash it, clean it, or replace it. And the scabbard itself is wood. Alright? World War I rolls along. Alright? The United States is going to go to war. And we got these beautiful bright blade bayonets. And our allies are telling us, you don't want bright blades. There's a problem. They reflect light. They reflect moonlight. And sometimes when you're walking at night, if you got these things on your rifles, a guy in the Zeppelin or the guy in the plane can spot you. Darken them. So the word goes out to darken the blades. Even take existing blades, blue them, parkerize them, do something to them. But don't leave them in that bright condition. Alright? Now, over here, production figures. Springfield made over 1 million bayonets as late as 1922. I have one here, it's made in 1919. If you're a World War I reenactor, you want either the 1910 scabbard or the leather scabbard. You want bayonets made before 1918. Unless you're a super duper reenactor and you do the eviction of bonus marchers, okay? So, and Rock Island made 430,000. So you got over 1.5 million bayonets. Now, there should be the word inventory, not inventory. All right. In 1933, they went to the warehouses to find out what they had. Okay? And what they found out was they had 2 million 1917 Enfield bayonets, but the Enfield was the backup. They had 581,000 1905 bayonets. Now you look at the figure, that's like 1 million bayonets are missing. I suspect, I can't get it clarified, I suspect this was the War Reserve. I think the National Guard and the regular Army, the Marine Corps, the Navy, their bayonets are not counted in that inventory, 1933. Alright? They still had a good number of 1910 scabbards, and they still had almost 100,000 of the leather scabbards. Alright? And they realized war clouds are forming. Okay? So we got to start thinking ahead. Alright? Let me just do this real fast. Okay. In mid-1941, they put out a bid for bayonets. They want 287,700 to be delivered starting January 1942 with the new scabbard, and they're to be ready by, I think it was June, was the goal. So they send out this request, and they said, how much will it cost? And you must make it on existing machinery. The bids come back. All companies tell them the same thing. Can't be done. Existing machinery will not make bayonets. We will make bayonets for you at about approximately $4 each. But you have to buy the machines. We will rent them from you. And when the contract is over, they're your machines. Take them back. All right? So that slows up the deliveries. Okay? They also decide to go to a fiberglass scabbard. Now, some guys are going to tell me I've seen these with 1942 on the back. Those are the covers. Boyd made covers as late as 1942 for the older scabbards. Fiberglass is going to be the scabbard. All right? And we had what we call civilian production. All kind of problems. First one was steel. They required, the government made a specification for a certain special steel. And they had trouble getting that steel. So they had to change the specification and authorize another steel that was just as good. The first bayonets that were made with the plastic handles, they were greased up, they were sent into theater. When they went to degrease them, the plastic handles started dissolving. Nobody had thought of that. That the solvent that takes off the cosmoline also takes off your grips. So they had to go and hold up the order. Alright, you're a factory. You're making these things. You're waiting for your steel. Didn't come in. You lay off your workers. A month later, steel arrived. Your workers have joined the military, gotten other jobs. Now you got to get a new workforce. You got to retrain them. Start working on the order again. Steel doesn't come, or the plastic's no good. A lot of problems. Now, the civilian production went from April of 1942 to May of 1943. And you can see the different manufacturers. The one on the bottom, Wilde Tool, they had the most problems. Wilde Tool are the most desirable from a collector point of view. Alright? But they're cranking out bayonets. Now they're told, we want plastic grips, We want the initials of the company and we want the date of manufacture. Now, the early ones, Springfield Armory, they even had serial numbers after 1906 for inventory purposes. And then they realized it's not that important to have serial numbers on bayonets, okay? So there's no serial numbers, plastic grips, and the initials of the company. And you can see only 4% of the long bayonets were Wilde tool. And there's a few of them here on the tables. On the bottom, I got the USN Mark I. They were never made for the Springfield. They were made for the Dunn training rifle, which is a giant toy. And they were made for the Navy to practice drilling and things like that. They were never designed to be put on the rifles themselves. They're plastic. Most of them are damaged. Finding one in good shape has cost you more than a real bayonet. What's important is they needed scabbards, so they went to the company making M3 scabbards, had them make scabbards that are marked USN MK1, and a lot of them end up on bayonets because the scabbard shortage. But the bayonet itself was never made for the Springfield. Now, how's the M1 get involved? When the M1 comes out, the government doesn't want to design a whole new bayonet. So they're going to issue the Springfield Bayonet. In 1942, near the late part of 1942, okay, a decision is made after some experimentation, all right, that maybe we don't need a long bayonet. Maybe that's really an anachronism from the First World War. The Italians, this is their bayonet, the 1891. The German Mauser bayonet, model of 1888. Maybe we should go to a short bayonet. It'll take less steel. It'll take weight off the soldier's gear. Less to carry. And they call them 1905 E1 when they're experimenting on them. Collectors still use that term. The military didn't. And what they did was the goal was to make the bayonet with a spear point. So you could stab in, cut up, cut down. And they realized they could do that with most of the World War II production bayonets. But the earlier bayonets, a lot of them had a very wide blood groove, or fuller, and if you put them in a spear point, they broke. So they had to design another variation, which is called the clip. And you can see it's just cut at an angle, and it still has the false edge. Others, they clipped it, and then they started carving away some of the false edge, so you still had the capability of cutting up. And those are often called the buoy. Now, over 1 million of these bayonets were made cut down. Now, if you look at the figure of 3.5 million total long bayonets, it means 1/3 of them became short bayonets. If you sort of look at the World War II production and the mobilization, half of the bayonets were cut. Now, it took a while to transition. When troops landed in North Africa, they had the long bayonet. When they landed in Sicily, some had the long bayonet. By the time they get to Anzio, and definitely by the time they get to Normandy, short bayonets. Now, in the Pacific, not everybody wanted a short bayonet because you were going up against the Japanese. And their Model 30 bayonet was a lot longer, all right? But the short bayonet was supposed to be the bayonet, the M1 bayonet. Now, they start making the M1 bayonet, and here's where you run into a lot of trouble with defining figures. No one seems to have accurate production figures on the M1 bayonet, and they vary so much. American Fork and Hoe, most of my sources agree, they made over 1 million. But you can see, Union Cutlery?
Utica.
Utica Cutlery, there's a wide variance. Union Fork and Hoe, there's a wide variance. PAL is a variance. But Oneida Limited has the greatest variance. I mean, 200,000 versus 20,000. Now, Oneida Limited had a lot of them in storage, the long ones. And they were told, just cut them down before you send them out. I think what happened is their bayonets are double counted. They're counted as 1905s when they were made and M1s when they left the factory. Now, they didn't get the word, which was, on the M1 bayonet, don't put the date on it. They put the date on it for a while and then they dropped it. The others never put a date on it. So one of the things that serious collectors want is an Oneida Limited 43 made that way. Dave, you brought one, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I have seen one before tonight. And it was at Harrisburg, and the guy had all rare everything around it. And I think I insulted him when I saw the price, and I asked him if the rifle came with it. All right. Now, we'll get into this in a while, but during the Korean War, though, a lot of troops complained, and they had complained during the Battle of the Bulge and during the Hurtgen Forest, that when they were wearing gloves, they had a lot of trouble with manipulating this little button to get the bayonet out of the scabbard or off the rifle, things like that. So there were a lot of complaints, and they decided to address that by creating what's called the M5 bayonet. Now, the M5 is a bayonet knife, and it has a little stud on here which snaps into the link gas plug of an M1. The trouble with this bayonet, it only fits the M1. It will not fit a Springfield. The only picture I've ever seen anybody even tried was a picture of Fidel Castro with one of his rebels, and the guy's got one of these on a Springfield tied with baling wire. Okay? Not much demand for these. Why? They came out after the Korean War. The biggest use of them that I have seen in actual photos is 82nd Airborne desegregating Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. People who, National Guard in Watts, Detroit, Newark, Chicago, and none of those really constitute combat action. So there's no great demand for the M5 and the minor variation, the M5A1, which gave it in a bigger, more protruding button, because again, guys complain, I can't get this off my rifle or I can't get it into the scabbard. So there's not much collector interest in them. During the Korean War, there was a guy named Millet, and it's called Battle of Bayonet Hill. What I had the date on here, 1941, not 1951. He got the Medal of Honor. He led the last official bayonet charge of the U.S. Army. Why? Because he loved the bayonet. And he managed to scrounge up 1905s in Korea in 1951. Trained his company over and over again in the bayonet. And he led the last bayonet charge of the U.S. military. Some guys Vietnam guys use bayonets, Iraq. In defensive positions when they were out of ammo and about to be overrun, yes. He's the last guy to say, take the hill with the bayonet. So he got the Medal of Honor, and that was the last combat use of the 1905. What I got here is a chart. If you ever decided to collect bayonets, if you're a young person watching this video at home, and I can give you something that'll keep you busy for the next 50 years. Make a shopping list out, go to gun shows, maybe $200 on you, $300, find all the bayonets, find out which is the cheapest one, go back, buy that one. It'll be easy the first couple of years. All right. The bright bayonets, made between 1906 1917, 12 different years, bingo. Then the dark ones. Remember, they took the other ones and they sent them back. One of the problems you're going to run into is I call these abortions that I call polished bayonets. That's a dark bayonet where someone takes steel wool and says, I'll make it bright again. No, you won't. That bluing, parkerizing goes into the metal too much, and you can't reproduce the tiny blue strip on by the hilt. But that's 18 bayonets. Then I got cut downs. Every one of those could have been a cut down. I put an asterisk because maybe some were clipping, some were speared. Rock Island Bright, 7 variations. Rock Island Dark, 10 variations, and of course, 10 if you want to get the cut downs. The civilian ones, 1942, all 6 companies made them, so the 6 bayonets you need. 1943, 6 of them made it. Then you get the cut downs. Oh, that means 12. All right, now comes your M1 bayonets. Wilde lost the contract. They didn't make any short bayonets. They lost the contract, out of the way. So you have 5 companies that made them, and then you got Oneida Limited 43, all by itself. And you got your M5, 4 different manufacturers, M5A1, 4 different manufacturers. Comes out to a total of 113 bayonets. Not to mention, and we have some up here, foreign bayonets. Koreans, for example, took M1 bayonets and made them into knives. All right? The CMP has sold bayonets that have Danish scabbards, Greek scabbards, and even Greek-made copies of the different bayonets. And there'll be some up here on display, all right, which you'll be able to see. And then we have the problem of the reproductions. And this one here, OLUS 43. At least they're slick. They're going to make a repro of the rarest bayonet. Which means, if you're a reenactor and you get to use this for a couple of years, you can probably sell it as an original. Okay? When they're new like this, you can tell by the weight. The plastic has a different shine to it. When you handle the real ones in these, you can tell. They're not sold as, fakes, they're sold as reproductions. They also make reproduction long bayonets. And this one here is also marked OL 43. It's not rare. And reproduction scabbards, even the khaki ones for World War I. Another bayonet you're going to sometimes run into are the chrome-plated ones. They again were made for VFWs, American Legion, so forth, for parade purposes. All they did was chrome-plate an existing bayonet. All right, we've given you a quick rundown because it's getting late. Some of you don't want to drive too much in the rain or drive at night at all. And Dave, do you want to add anything to the presentation?
Sure. Actually, there was another manufacturer of the M3 Scabbard, and that was Detroit Gasket Company. And the way you can tell them is from the ordnance bomb that has the U.S., there's different stenciling, and also they have what's known as a tilde that's underneath the ordnance bomb. And you can also, if you have an M3 from Beckwith, another one from Detroit, you can also look very finely at the fiberglass that they use, and you can tell that they used a different mesh webbing underneath. So we also have an example of the Detroit over there as well.
When we do our B-roll, as we call it, we visit different tables, things we describe. When that comes out, we'll put the word out. Chris will edit it, add music, dancing girls, whatever he has to do to it. And it'll give you more detail for the more serious collector or for the obsessive-compulsive personality. Anything else, Dave?
No.
Any questions? I'll try to answer them, or pass them off to Dave, which is my better answer. There being none, I thank you much for your patience, and I know after a full belly, most of you just wanted to go to sleep.